in data?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, I started
Perfect.
95, so yeah.
Perfect. Without further ado, you will explain to us SAS programming in CAS. Over to you,
Sure.
Chris.
So, afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm going to be talking about SAS programming in CAS and how you can access and use it. We'll probably look at, well, I will today, I'll look at SAS program for the Cloud Analytic Server, how to access the CAS functionality. So I'll do some basics about the Viya runtimes, CAS sessions and libraries, how to load data into CAS tables, running SAS code in Viya against CAS tables and the differences between CAS and SAS processing, how to share and save your data in CAS once you've done stuff, and then a suggested programming pattern and a brief demo just to bring it all together. So that's kind of the plan. So start off, what is CAS? It's the cloud-based runtime environment built by SAS. And in the words of one of the developers, it's by runtime environment, it's a combination of hardware and software where the data management and the analytics take place. It was built really to provide all the key functionality that you'd want in a cloud-based application. So it's got network access with a public API. So it's accessible through SAS clients, third-party clients, open source clients, Java. Your data is going to be held in a secure cloud. All computing will happen as close as possible to the data and it will be secure. It's elastic, so servers can add and remove nodes as demand changes. And it's fault tolerant, so failures on nodes will just be recognized, isolated and dropped from clusters. Processes will just continue. So that's broadly what the Cloud Analytic Services is. An overview of the runtime. You can see you've got, within Viya, you've got SAS Compute Services and the CAS cluster. You'll start by your normal cloud, you're signing into your SAS Studio or SAS client. Then you can start up a launch CAS session from within your SAS session. That will establish the connection to the CAS cluster, which will then establish a connection back to the compute services. That then means you can expose the library, the CAS libraries in SAS Studio. You can submit code against CAS data and process it on the CAS server, and then get, oops, sorry, too far. And then you can get the results returned to the client session. You can also transfer the data back from CAS, or you can save it in the SAS library in the SAS session or on the CAS server. So that's some background about the analytics service and how we access and now how we access it. So within a SAS session, you'll just start a CAS session with a simple CAS statement, or with a bit more control, you can do the CAS with the session name. You can set some session options. For example, there you're setting a session name of SES1, and you're setting a timeout and requesting some metrics for CAS process to be written to the log. There's a lot of different options that you can set in within the CAS statement. Look at the log, really look at the documentation to see what they are, but those are some minorly useful ones. Once you've got a session launched, you can assign CAS libraries, which are the CAS equivalent of SAS libraries, using the CASLib _all _assign statement. That will lead you then to see all the available CASLibs in the library view, including any set up by your SAS admin. Alternatively, you can assign a specific CAS library using a lib name and the CAS reference, and a CASLib reference rather. CAS libraries themselves, similar to SAS libraries, but they're cloud-based. They're container instances that can hold CAS tables either in memory or on disk. They can also hold metadata for data sources, which could be a directory path or the connection details for a database. CASLibs are associated with access control, so you can define the groups and users that access them, or the admins can, really. Loading data into memory, into a table. You have a CAS session, you want some CASLibs set up, you want to load some data. There are a few ways to do this. For SAS datasets, probably the most efficient is just to use the load statement in a CAS util procedure. This allows you to do parallel loading of a SAS dataset into CASLib. Note that you've got a replace statement in there to which allows you to overwrite an existing CAS table. And you can see within that libraries view that the CAS libraries themselves are displayed slightly different to normal SAS libraries, so you can distinguish them fairly easily, and that that class is an in-memory table. The alternative way is to do a sequential load, which is just by replacing one of your lib names, your outbound lib name, with a CAS user or the CAS lib. It's slightly less efficient. This data will be loaded sequentially, and I can sort of show that how that works. With the first one, the parallel lifting into memory, you're loading multi-threaded process to transmit data directly from source data to CAS worker nodes. With the serial lifting, you're going to a single process to transmit data to the CAS controller, which then distributes data to the various worker nodes. You can also save data from memory. Those are all in memory tables. You can save data from memory to storage using, again, proc CAS util and the save CAS data, save statement, which will save it as a SAS.dat file, which is not your normal SAS BDAT, but the SAS.dat file. It's a cloud native format, been optimized for CAS. So that's the way you're saving, if you're saving stuff on the server. SAS distinguish between client side and server side when they talk about CAS. And when they say client side, they mean the SAS side. When they say server side, they usually mean the CAS server side. So it's a slight distinction then. Once you have run your data, you can then terminate your specific CAS sessions by using the CAS terminate statement. So that will terminate first one will terminate a session called CAS auto. The second one will terminate all CAS sessions. And a fairly basic tip, which is very useful actually, but set the SAS log message level to info. So you use that options message level equals I, and that will put a note in the log whenever CAS is using it, whenever the processing is running on the Cloud Analytic Services, which is pretty useful because, as you'll see later, it's not always obvious where your stuff is actually running, where your code is actually executing. So that's a fairly basic thing that I would suggest you do if you are running stuff in CAS. You can also start multiple CAS sessions. So that one there has got CAS my session 1, my session 2. That's how it'll start your 2 CAS sessions. Obviously, you can put options on each of them. You can list all your running CAS sessions with the _all and list statement in the CAS statement. And there's a list about, which gives you general details about SAS versions, servers, and licenses. So how do you actually go about running SAS 9 code in Viya? I'll start by looking at some procedures code. It's quite simple. You just use a CAS lib in the procedure. So in here, we've got the SAS 9 code on the left is a proc reg statement, which is using a CAS user library statement, which means that it will use data from there. Alternatively, you can actually run CAS enabled procs, which is a more limited set of them. I'll go through some of them in a minute, but for proc reg, the equivalent is proc reg select. And again, it's just using the CAS user lib name, but a CAS user enabled procedure will actually execute CAS actions behind the scenes to execute. Standard SAS procs will use the CAS data, but actually execute in the SAS session. So there's quite a distinction there, really. And generally, all SAS 9.4 based procedures will work with CAS libs, but most SAS procedures will actually run on the SAS session, not on the Cloud Analytic Service. Some SAS procedures have been enhanced, and that includes your proc data sets and your related bits, so copy, append, and delete, means, report, tabulate, and summary, transpose. Sort will also run, although sort, you don't really require sorting in CAS, as I'll talk about later, so it's mainly used for deduplication. Proc SQL doesn't run on CAS server, but Fed SQL does, but there are some limitations on that. The CAS enabled procedures you have available will depend on what you have licensed. You have a base set with Visual Analytics, but more added if you have additional visual products licensed, I believe, is my understanding. So that's procedures. What about data step code? Well, data step code will run and execute in CAS if you specify CAS libres for the input and output tables. You include at least one variable in the data step. CAS does not support zero-column tables, and use only CAS supported language elements in the code, which is not as easy to find out as you might expect, but it is, the information is there. So not all language elements are supported. For example, in files, inputs and data line statements are not supported. If you have those in code, they'll actually run, the data step will run in SAS. Modify, remove and replace statements are not supported in CAS and can't modify an in-memory table. There are equivalents to these, but they're not those, you don't use those statements. The where equals dataset option is not supported on output data steps. If it's present, the data step will run in the SAS session. Most of the time, this will just show up in the log as not running on the CAS server. It'll just say, it won't have that indicator say it's running on the CAS server. Sometimes it will actually specify it and say, because that statement is present, it's running on the SAS server. You can check your data, your Viya programming documentation for restrictions. You can see that restriction, and this statement is not supported in a data step that runs on CAS, so keep an eye out for those. There's some significant differences with running stuff in CAS. One of the biggest ones is due to the way data is split and stored on multiple nodes in CAS. Functions or statements that rely on the order of data may behave differently. There's no implicit order in a CAS table, a bit like a SQL database table. So the SAS elements that rely on order in a data set can and will give you inconsistent results. So things like retain, diff, lag, _n, first and last stop. Some statements can be a problem, and temporary arrays. There's a single threaded option on the data step to avoid those issues. And this is a fairly sort of simple data step, but if you notice on the single threaded one, it's just using the single option, single equals yes option on that will enforce a threaded count. Otherwise, that _n put statement could well produce inconsistent results. Another related difference is due to the way data is split is with bigroup processing, and it does produce some slightly different ways you have to handle things. Bigroup data step processing in CAS is performed on temporary copies of in-memory tables, and when it's completed, bigroups are the bigroups and the temporary tables are discarded. So any future access to those bigroups, you'd have to recreate the temporary tables. If you do specify a bigroup, CAS will partition the data on the formatted values of the first by variable. Rows within each bigroup are then ordered on the raw values of the by variables. And the data step will run on multiple threads on each node with one thread per bigroup. There's a note there at the bottom that says partitioning is CAS. Partitioning in CAS is more permanent and efficient. I'm not really going to look at that in this talk, but probably in a future when I'll go into more about partitioning and how you can leverage that better. In terms of multi-threading, if you've got a low cardinality bigroup, so in this case we've got one there which is a bigroup by gender, so you only have 2 threads in them. On a higher cardinality group, you've got one by age there, you've got 6 bigroups in there, so you have 6 threads. Obviously, if you choose something which is very high cardinality, you could end up with a lot of threads, which may be an issue, something to be aware of. Some elements in SAS code, of SAS 9 code, will actually behave differently. One of the other differences between CAS is that the default encoding in CAS is UTF-8 rather than Latin, I think, which was the old one. An index function, functions that parse character strings like index may return unexpected results. You've also got different data types. Yeah, we have different data types in CAS. So previously just numeric and character. Well, we've now got varchar, which is there partly to take advantage of some of the differences in cloud infrastructure. But those char and varchar data types may give different results because you have multi-byte character sets, particularly with the character functions. So that's those things are things to watch out for. User-defined formats need to be available on the SAS server and on the CAS server if they're used in code. And the big one at the bottom, actually, which I kind of probably should have pulled out as a more significant thing, data sets don't need sorting before merging or using in procedures on CAS. Which is clearly quite a big advantage in some cases. Macro code, macro processing, macro code pre-compiled on the SAS client session, so it will just execute as normal in CAS. But there are SimGet and SimPut, which link data step to the macro functionality will error, and you see the error there. SimGet is unknown and cannot be accessed. Similarly for call SimPut and SimPutX, you can't use those. Other than that, the macro code should just be compiled as normal in a SAS session and will just execute in CAS. Sharing some data. So session tables are local to this CAS session. Global tables can be accessed by CAS session, and i.e. anyone with authorization. So if you want to share data once you've created your tables, you probably want to promote them to a global table so that anybody with authorization can view them. And data prepared in CAS can then be used by other users or for further analytics. And to promote it, it's fairly straightforward. You'll just use a proc CAS util statement to promote your CAS table, or you can do it via the data step with the promote equals yes option. One thing to be aware of, CAS is strict, so to overwrite tables, you must either drop the table or use a replace to try and to force it to overwrite. But you have to do that explicitly. So onto a simple programming pattern for CAS, which is start your CAS session, assign your SAS libraries to the CAS libs, load the data into CAS, use your CAS lib reference in the code. Then you can save your CAS lib data, choosing whether to share it, either by promoting it to a global CAS lib, or you can end your session. And that's like the briefest view through through CAS. I'll just now switch and just show you a quick demo. Hopefully this will work. All right, so this is a fairly basic demonstration of stuff. I've just taken some 3 CSV files. I've got some mortality data, some GDP data, a data set about regional codes, and I'm going to use the SAS help demographics table to produce to load. I'm going to load these in, merge them together, and then just produce some output, visual output, and then we'll save the data sets back for use so somebody else can use them later. So first steps, I'm going to set my option message level to I, and then I'm going to start a CAS session with an active CAS lib set, and then I'll list the sessions and details, and then assign all libraries. So you can see in the log, we've successfully connected to the cloud server. It's got listed all the sessions. So I've got session demo is active with the correct port. And then I've assigned all the CAS libraries, and you can see them all in here. So CAS user has now come up. nothing in it, but I've also got access to public in there as well. So now I want to set some file names, which is just the same as the normal file name statement. And then I'm going to use proc CAS util to load each of those CSVs into the CAS library. And proc CAS util, as I've got a list tables statement at the end there, so it's listed out what tables have now been loaded in, and you can see those tables have all gone in. So we've got our data in there. We've got some GDP data, some mortality data. That's all sorted. I was going to use this option here to import one of them just to show that you can actually do the proc import. But actually, when I did it, I realized it loaded the data differently. So I've taken that out, but that's something to be aware of. It didn't actually end up with the same data set in there if I use that route. So then I want to load a client-side data set, which is SAS Help Demographics. And that has loaded that into there. So we've now got a demographic data set in there. Now we want to tidy some of this up, rename some columns. So I'll use CAS util, and we'll use the alter table statement, which allows us to specify the data set we want to modify, and then we can rename some columns. So we'll do name and rename. We'll also do some keep only some stuff that we want. We'll do the same for demographic and for GDP. And you can see it states in the log that we've got the SAS Cloud Analytic Services server has processed all of those. I'm going to summarize this using what is a CAS only statement, actually, this proc MD summary, which will produce a variety of statistics for a data set for numeric data in a data set. And I'll just run this because it's easier to show, really. The output from that is I'm going to summarize this, but I group this by the ISO code and the year and output it as annual mortality. And you can see that this has produced a table with an awful lot of statistics. You've got means, mins, maxes, and what we're actually interested in is the sum. I'll have a quick look at that. It's summarized by ISO 3 code and year. And it's telling me what it's operating. It's only operating on the desk column, and we've got sums in them. So I've summarized that down to month. The original data set was actually in months rather than years. So I've summarized that down. Now I'm going to merge in my region data set to get some keys, and then I'll merge in the GDP data, and then I'll merge in the demographic data. And note, with all of these, I'm just doing a data set merge, but there's no sorting between any of them because we don't need sorting for this. So if I just run those. And again, running data step in Cloud Analytic Services, so you can see it's actually running in there, and we've merged all of those. In this case, you've got a where clause, which is also being processed in Cloud Analytic Services. So it's merged in, and we've got our final-ish data set, which is going to look something like that. Now I'm just going to produce some scatter plots, some basic scatter plots of GDP by deaths per 100,000. I macroed this just for convenience, but and we have some scatter plots by year. So I specified the year of deaths per 100,000 by versus GDP. Fairly straightforward. So we've done that, we've output those. If you are wanting to save this file within CAS, you can save it as a using proc CAS util. You can save it using this statement, and it will the save statement. And this will save it as a. Oh, that didn't do it. Because I hadn't put replace. So yeah, you need to make sure it won't overwrite. So you need to make sure you have your replace option set. And you can see there from the list option, we've saved that country mort per 100K as a SAS, as a SAS stat file. That then is already loaded onto the, is saved on the CAS and in the CAS location. It means that you can access it more easily, more quickly. You don't have to reload the data out. You still have to load the data into memory, but you don't have to upload the data to the CAS server. You can also promote it to the public area using the promote statement. In this case, I put a drop table into there to make sure I drop it first. I'll also put a proc contents in this. So we'll get a proc contents. So that has now run a proc contents, dropped the previous table if it existed, and then promoted it into public. And if I look in public, I've got country mortality per 100K. So somebody else could now, who had access to public, could now come in and use that and run that. And that is pretty much it, other than, I'll just run that to clean up. And then you can close your session with a CAS will terminate. And let me jump back to So in summary, CAS sessions are created alongside standard CAS sessions. CAS libs are connections to in-memory data. You can modify your SAS9 code for CAS libs to use CAS. Sequential row processing doesn't apply, so you don't need to sort data. You have to be very consider what's happening with by-group processing, any row-dependent statements and functions and the use of N. And proc CAS util is the Swiss Army knife of CAS table handling. And that's it. Hopefully that was.
Thank you very much, Chris.
And I saw some questions in there, yeah.
Yep, we have a first question in the chat is, can you share a rule of thumb on the best practices as when to use char versus varchar?
I think it standardizes to varchar. I'm not 100% sure on this at the moment, but because it's now using UTF-8 and you can use different character encoding in there better, I think varchar is the default one. And there are, I'll take that on board actually, Steve, and I'll try and incorporate into the next one, because I can't answer. It's probably the simple answer there. Is CAS available in G? Hi, John. I don't think it is actually. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether you can access it full client. I'm not sure. Vasily, do you know? Can you access CAS? From EG? I mean, it's just a client, I guess. So yeah, I would have thought.
Exactly.
I think you can access it from any client.
Well, tell you what, it is available in EG only if you can connect EG. So if you want to access CAS from EG, then that means you went the workaround route to connect to Via 3.5. There isn't a reliable way of connecting EG to Via 4. So if it's a Via 3.5 and you're connecting from EG, that means you're connecting directly to Object Spawner. Yes, you can access CAS by programming, just like you can program in SAS Studio. Hopefully that explains, John.
Yeah, by the sound of it, then it'll depend as well, partly on how it's been set up.
Okay.
Yes, you can, Dirk. In your next question, which is, can I collect data on a daily basis and append it to a CAS data set? Yes. I'll cover that in the next one, which is going to be on high performance computing using the Cloud Analytics server. But you can use CAS actions to directly append data to a new data set. Yep,
that's for those that haven't seen the question in the chat. Yeah.
Sorry.
We have one more person joining. I want to go back to the question about the varchar asked by Steve Thompson. We had a client who we migrated from Visual Analytics on SAS 9 in tables kept in Laser, and we migrated onto Via Visual Analytics, and we use the varchar predominantly across the board when converting data sets. And I must say, the varchar saved a lot because that padding in the laser tables was still taking space. And on Via, we believe, despite the fact that we migrated from Latin 1 to UTF-8, which pushes the size of the overall data, we were able to shrink the data set sizes by themselves by about 30 to about 35% because of using varchar. So that was a very big benefit there. Another question. Can CASLib be secured to be accessed by certain users?
Yes. Simple answer, yeah, by your admin or somebody with admin rights. You can set up groups and roles that can secure CAS libs.
It's worth mentioning that there is now a different set of permissions available for the libraries. Chris, do you think you can expand on that one?
I'm not really sure about those, to be honest. The different set of no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can extend on that one that it's secured, but now it also has a variety of permissions available. So you can have certain users that can have read access, write access naturally, but you can also now give a certain set of users a permission to secure the library. That is, you can delegate to the other people that can delegate access to the others as well. So the full set of permissions. And now with the Via, there is also guest access available as well. So for certain libraries, you can nominate that people without any authentication or authorization can access data.
Is it right as well? And I think I read this in when I was looking through some of this stuff, row level and column level access controls as well?
Yeah, there is a row and column level access similar to SAS 9. And if I use that as a segue, in fact, we have presentation from Dirk, who is here with us on the call, and that's going to be next on our next event, which is 2nd of June, and Dirk will be presenting on row level security to hierarchical data in SAS Visual Analytics. Dirk, while you're on the call, is that Visual Analytics on SAS Via?
Indeed, yes. SAS Via 3.5. Row level security is limited to knowing who you are and which groups you are in, but things can become too complex for that. If the scope of control of managers is too wild, and we have solved that. And in the process, we also have created a mechanism to browse other hierarchical data, particularly the data about multinationals, where corporations can own other corporations. We also integrated that in a G2E application, if I'm right, and I consider involving someone who did that. So maybe we'll have some news on that too.
Excellent. Yep. So talking about that, the role level security, make sure you join us next month, which is on 2nd of June, same time, same place. You do need to register. And thank you very much for the introduction. Looking forward to that presentation. No doubt it's going to be an exciting one. Doesn't look like we have any other questions left. So unless anyone else want to raise anything, we got just a couple minutes left. Nope. And Chris, thank you very much for excellent presentation. Thank you very much for the demo. Thank you to everyone else for finding the time to join. We will be saving the recording, publishing it in usual on the YouTube and all the other places. So keep an eye on that. If you need to see the recording further or link, do contact myself and Valeria. We have our LinkedIn and contact information in chat. Peter, you're saying 2nd of June is a bank holiday, is it? Okay. Thank you very much, and have a nice the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.